Osan from Nerdimations. And today, I'm going to continue the Uncolonized series. Thank you for all the views and support on the 4th video, and also thank you for whoever commented on that video. It means quite a bit to me to know that someone actually cares. But anyways, without further ado, let's begin. The first moves of the summer of 1886 came in the Sokoto, which was unsurprising because a few videos back they were wrecking everyone, and they had a new problem. You see, the Ashanti Empire had realized that if they didn't do anything about the fact that they now had to deal with the Samori and the Sokoto between them, they would be cooked AF. So they went on a literal rampage of destroying different kingdoms. This was, quote unquote, for protection. But really, this was simply just because they didn't want to be lagging behind in the race. The Samori had also decided to do something. You see, footage alone is still upset about their loss literally in the first video, or 6 years ago, and they haven't recovered. So the Samori did the smart thing and invaded the now little kingdom, taking over most of it into official territories. But it took a while to number one get any kings in footage alone. To not want to revolt, which takes a while. So it took about a few months of fighting in resistance groups, smaller kingdoms that was under Earth footage alone's vast suzerain, before they could grab the whole thing. Also, personally, I think the Samori Empire kind of looks nice in the shape. The Samori then went on a smaller rampage of destroying of vassalizing other African states. The only thing though is that they avoided all the ones that were vassalized by France first, knowing that still France would totally cook and destroy them. The next fight would begin here in Somalia, where the Hoboyo Sultanate went to war with literally all of its neighbors and realized that maybe being with Italy wasn't a good thing. So, under the leadership of the new, you recently brought in and king of the Hoboyo Sultanate, Ali Ahmed. He went on a campaign to unite Somalia. This was very worrying to what remained of the Somali kingdoms. There were the other Somali tribes who mostly didn't care too much, and there were the northern Somali states who, didn't want to die. But there was also the Isaaq Sultanate, who realized they could not stand alone, and so they made basically a governing unified state with their nearby kingdoms. The goal was two things. Number one, to increase the prosperity of the area, and number two, to ward off Ethiopian and Somali aggression, because if either of these came in, it would be totally game over. And so they also tried to make an alliance with the East African kingdoms, Somalia and Ethiopia, now dealing with a much larger pact, went on an alliance with each other, or in case that if they wanted to invade a Dasak Sultanate, they could count on each other to not get destroyed by the other kingdoms in the alliance. This will soon probably be tested. Meanwhile, Buganda was still doing Bugandan things in the form of literally destroying all their neighbors. They moved in and even defeated the Turkana tribe, putting themselves dangerously close to Ethiopia, and raising further concerns on a possible war with Buganda. Now, there was originally supposed to be a negotiation of a non-aggression pact to hopefully cool down the East African rift, but it did not work. And all that happened is that everyone just got angrier. It was kind of stupid. Now, although Uganda could celebrate being a major power, something that few African states, especially including the ones that had just been in totally at least 360 no-scoped by Buganda, now they could sit on the crown of the area and hopefully say Ethiopia, which is totally not pissed, won't say destroy all of it. Buganda also realized that if they wanted to keep this land and make sure that the Mahadas and other kingdoms didn't try to take their now vast territories, they needed to, number one, at least make the people of the area a bit happier about their new circumstances, and number two, who they raised a large army. In return, they went straight to the British, asking for military guidance in return for a good portion of Buganda's money. The UK took the deal and had officers train the Bugandese army. Now the stage for a war in Africa was set. We have multiple kingdoms that want all this, that are all converging on the same territory, and we have already paranoia between them that one of them will start a war. Amazing. The Congo were still cooking up destruction. It's kind of like their new job at this point. They destroyed even more small kingdoms and tribes. It was in what would later be known in the history books as a massacre of kingdoms. Now only an estimated 6,000 to 12,000 actually died, but definitely a lot of damage was dealt, and a lot of small different states and tribes were subdued. It was getting so crazy that places like the Kuba Kingdom, who originally had ran off of Congolese support, were starting to worry that if they didn't act fast, has to make an alliance, heck, even with Uganda, and start a war with the Congo first. The Congolese will soon own all of Africa. Not very likely. Given we're talking about Africa,
the second biggest continent, mind you.
So it wasn't likely that this would actually happen, but still the Cuba had fears. Also, the Congolese were doing terrifyingly well. They now had an economy that was nearing the size of Portugal. They had built a central bank, built roads and many other infrastructure, and Cabo Luango and San Salvador especially had basically turned into places that more resembled London than small African and tribal towns.
Not just that, there was way more Congolese towns now.
The Congolese were seen as the beacon of Africa, a nation that was able to win wars easily, maybe because they took easy targets. Maybe you should study that, and also was able to economically succeed.
And Portugal was having some fears.
Now at this point, the Congolese had finally abolished slavery fully, and also had formed a senate to rival the power of the king, and that senate it also had equal chances for women and men to get in, and causing the country to become surprisingly have better human rights than some European countries.
Not just that, that also means that they were more into that they had just blasted themselves out in civil rights out in West America,
in the dust
of liberality.
So I call that a Congolese success. Actually, at this point, the Troke Kingdom had just ousted their king just so that they could join the Congo, because, well, the king of the Troke wasn't doing nowhere as good as say the king of the Congo. And now even European kingdoms weren't messing with anything now. They had just left Congo off limits. Meanwhile, for even further south, out at Botswana, they just changed the name, decided that they should go and finally unite all the Swana peoples. They went and quickly did a bit of country housekeeping, and by totally wrecking and destroying any tribes that fought them, or literally just this one, as all the others willingly joined their brethren. Number one, because they were still scared the British could come around any moment, and number two, because they saw them as basically their brothers. There's no problem with joining them. And also the country had its own senate, and it finally declared itself after writing its first constitution. It became a democracy.
Not just that, it also catched up straight to the Congolese.
Yeah. But Botswana, or Swanaland, and now stood also as a beacon and also a threat to literally all of its neighbors and original allies. So they didn't see the Botswana too much as a threat, because Botswana was at this point still very peaceful. Their only the actual rival for now, who was maybe whatever San Raiders came in to steal cattle. That's literally all that was all Botswana actually worried about. Me and now we'll see Egypt finally do something about the Mahdists. They launched a massive offensive that in 3 weeks took over a majority of Mahdi's territories, these especially in the north. It was quick, and at first it seemed easy. We'll take the entire country of Sudan in months at most. But then, one of the greatest coalitions assembled. Ethiopia, Somalia, Buganda, and the Isaac. Yes, they put aside their differences. Plus the Sokoto, the different states of the Ubangi area, and the Sanusia order, all went together for the Mahdists and swept back with all of them together landing an astonishing defeat that embarrassed Egypt.
That Egypt got taken over by the Sanusi order.
Not the whole thing,
but most of it.
They were literally, Egypt was badly wrecked. The cities of Damietta and Alexandria were literally put under siege, and Cairo and the Suez fell, and so now literally only Damietta, Alexandria, and Aswan stood as what remained of Egyptian power. They literally had to basically beg the Ottomans to make an offensive in Tripolitania. The only problem is that when they got there and started dealing the damage that they did and try to do, they were wrecked.
And almost all of Tripoli was taken.
No, they took the entire thing.
Yeah.
The unification of Libya was secured, and now the next site, it was possibly Egypt, but everyone else was like, no, we're going to spare Egypt just us for this one. And so the treaty went as so.
But Ethiopia actually agreed with the Sanusi order.
But everyone else, including the Sokoto, who are, guess what, more powerful, all pushed against the idea, saying that this would make the Sanusi order too powerful, and they were trying to keep a balance in Africa. And so here was the deal. So the Sudan would become a fully independent country, right? And it could act fully independently of Egypt. Next, Egypt would have to pay a ton of money, and next after that, Uganda, which at this point realized the B in its name was useless, and it was only making the names harder to say. They got the far south of Egypt and Eritrea, modern day Eritrea, went to Ethiopia, which made who realized that they had too much stuff on their hands, and so made the Afar province just for these new incorporated areas. Most of it went to the Tigray, and also almost the entire country would be occupied for the next 365 days, or the Senussi order would have management over this. But Ethiopia, forced there to be a joint occupation of the nation because they were scared that possibly, if the Senussi order is left just unchecked to take over, or they might actually solidify themselves as the powers. Also, you may not see it, but yes, the Sokoto are here. And also Sudan got an occupation zone, even though the desert itself and Cairo was occupied by the Senussi. Now, with all of that out of the way, we can move on some more. The Sokoto went for more, this time taking literally all the Mossi states hostage, and forcing them to join the sphere of influence. The same with some other small African states. The Sokoto were now clear. Now many people argued that the Sokoto were becoming too powerful for their own good. They were being too unchecked. They were too able of destroying, and so they were forced.
Needed to check them,
and Ethiopia stood as just that country. First they made a finalized version where they got the occupation zone of Egypt instead of the Sokoto, and also said that the Sokoto had to agree to never truly annex these territories, or else Egypt, Sudan, and Uganda, the Fang, and the Somali Empire were
as the Congo
were all obliged to go to war with the Sokoto. And you could see how the country, the Sokoto's size, was just destroyed by a coalition. So the Sokoto didn't actually annex them. But the Ashanti did continue, finally deciding that they were superior to everyone else, and named themselves after one of Africa's old great kingdoms, Ghana. Now with a revamp, but they on their name, and they can continue, say, destroying all their neighbors.
But then Ethiopia said, but then Ethiopia did the same thing they did to the Sokoto Caliphate.
They forced the Ashanti to agree to not attack more kingdoms, with the Somali or the Sokoto and Ethiopia obliged to declare war if this is violated. And we still have more, because late 1886 apparently was crazy. The Ndeble went. Okay, let's speed run this. The Ndeble went against some smaller kingdoms, and also made an alliance with the Mbundi against the still rising star in the Congo, which was also one of the first economic pacts. The Ndebele, they also got Botswana to join it, as Botswana was also seeing them as a possible threat. at the at at the at Burundi, probably trying to not be left behind by the other bee kingdom in the area. Went on a small went on a went into war to take down some and their nearby neighbors, and Rwanda simply took down a tiny African state. Look, am I supposed to remember all of these by heart? No. Imagine trying to remember 200 spelling bee lists for a 30-minute video. Okay, I think this video will be more than 30 minutes, honestly. Yeah, I don't think you're going to do that, my friend. Yeah, that's what I thought. Then, and also, oh, have Liberia, who went to war against their also smaller neighbors, and took down a tribe, the Kabuma. Meanwhile, as Liberia was going to war, the Somali Empire, taking notice from the other major powers on the continent, and finally made their own senate, only for them to be cooed. Dude, this will. Don't worry, this won't. Unlike in our world, this won't be a cycle. Now Liberia has the goofiest borders that can exist. This kind of looks like this just looks like someone's skull was totally cooked and destroyed.
It looks like someone is screaming in rock.
But not having a good time. The RO Confederacy, you realized the Sakudo were onto something and expanded their confederacy to include more of the more small kingdoms, who were totally peacefully put into this alliance, and also the RO called up APA, put up the idea of possibly going to war against the Sokoto, just because they're already too powerful. Even though this was put down by Ethiopia, especially, who even though would go to war to keep the Sokoto from getting too powerful, wouldn't go to war just because they can. Sure, they may have to eliminate the threat later, but eliminating the threat now would be annoying, given you have to keep Egypt in line. Now even more due to the conquest of Sokoto, the occupation of Sokoto's original occupation zone, and you have to manage the recent annexation of new territories. These areas were recently incorporated into Ethiopia. After like hundreds of treaties in the last few years spent on trying to coerce them into finally giving in. This only was getting the smaller Somali states even more scared at this point. You also would see a large fight, all skirmishes are reported between the Somali and the Ashanti, making possible ways that a new war could begin that would wreck Western Africa. Next, the French made their next moves in colonialism. I know this is uncolonized, but there's still colonialism. And this causes the Somali to basically a Cold War between the Samori and the French over who will have full control over the Senegal area. This once again worries neighbors on a bigger and possibly deadlier conflict. Meanwhile, Morocco has continued their expansion, now having declared full and total control over almost full and unanimous control over the south, hoping that this expansion will continue. They also have recently been found funding rebels in the area. Next, the Tunis rejects an offer by the Senussi order to join Libya around October. Then in November, we see a few things. First, new kingdom. First, the Congo goes on another spree of puppets. It seems that they've devoured most of the ones that they already had originally, and so need new ones. Then after that, Botswana made a trade deal with the Yeke Kingdom. Once again to try and stop the Congolese conquest, while the Congo continues vassalizing small kingdoms. They seem to have a knack with that. The Kuba Kingdom finally defeats the East. Finally, after years of guerrilla warfare, forces the Eastern Luba Kingdom to sign a peace deal that forces them to pay money to the Kuba, ending in the Kuba-Luba War. Finally, we also see the Congolese continue to exercise their power, by forcing the Tipu Tip with an ultimatum to finally abolish slavery. When they do, the Tipu Tip immediately fractured between the kingdom of Tanganyika, the kingdom of Eastern Congo, and the kingdom of Ubangi, even though it doesn't even border the Ubangi. So why are you naming it that way? This is all that really matters for the Congo now is the fact that these areas are even more manipulatable than they were before. As if, I swear, Congo, you are already too powerful. You can stop now. Even Ethiopia, which is now viewed as basically the peacemaker, has avoided actually confronting Congo on this, knowing that the Congo literally has a navy that controls the West African coast, aside with the one of the Dakota, being the only one even matching. Then the Congo realized that they still weren't big enough, and so they went and added some more territories to official parts of the Congo, encompassing a majority of the areas. These Congolese provinces is finally we get their own seats, but the Senate being revised so that these seats are proportional to the population of these areas. This is slight. There's slight things being brought up, like, for example, the ample with Salvador and Cabo Luango have have that would be over the rest, and also possible or will leave the leave a chance that the territories could vote, even though this hasn't been chosen yet. Also, the Congo finally holds its first election. This election purely takes place in a this election purely takes place in a in a new set, and that has just been picked up. The red is the Liberal Democratic group, and the blue is the National People's Front. The areas that aren't colored are basically draws. The United People's Group seems to is the winner. Maybe because they got Cabo Luongo, even though the capital of South Salvador was a close match. It also was barely won by the enemy. You have the Reds. Yeah, now they're also called the Reds and Blues. Currently the kingdom is thriving due to its massive accomplishments, and still no one will mess with it. And we still have more things. The Air Kingdom went on to continue fighting all their neighbors, as they just noticed that most of their farther neighbors had been doing just that. Now Air is a bit more shaped like you are. That and the French continued their game in December, where they were able to get more kingdoms on their side. Now a race between them and the Samori over to see who can get more Senegambia kingdoms to join them. So far, by the population and in area, it's the French, but in number of kingdoms, it is the Samori, who also have made a deal with Liberia so that they could use Liberia's ports instead of having to rely on the very tense negotiations and to allow them to use the Senegal River. This is beginning to make Liberia some cash. And finally, we're in 1887. Late 1886 was definitely a crazy year for our uncolonized Africa. And 1887 will be no different. Finally, but nothing really happened until March, when after a ton of convincing, and Egypt was able to get Ethiopia to stop their occupation early. That didn't mean that the Senussi or Sudan ended it, just Ethiopia. So still, Egypt looks embarrassing, like small. We then see Uganda continue with their aggressive foreign policy, this time threatening war against Ethiopia multiple times. Once and almost culminating in early April in a battle around Oromo territories. These battles prompt the Oromo to finally reunite into a kingdom with the force that can stop Ethiopia and Buganda, knowing that this is literally the only way they can survive if had the new political order. Their first job is to build a government, because if you don't have a government, what's the purpose of having a country? They also used the king and the senate, but they also made the king elected by different Oromo tribes. I don't actually know any Oromo tribes, so we're just going to go along with the lines I draw. Sorry, Oromos. And with that, now the Oromo could maybe stand up against Ethiopia and Uganda. The Swahili, we also went on a rampage, racking up a small tribe after small tribe. Once again, and just like the Congo, it was called the small tribe genocide. As basically the entire region was cleared of its notoriously tiny kingdoms, except in the West, where the different states put their differences aside, I just avoid getting totally mashed, and formed the kingdom of Tanganyika, the second one. Now, this wasn't a official entity for now, but they held monthly meetings to discuss, number one, the Swahili threat, and number two, economics, because managing your money is stupidly important. The Swahili temporarily wanted to only get to Lake Tanganyika before possibly expanding further. But they knew that further expansion, now with a group of states each actually standing up to them, would be significantly difficult. Even though they did know that they had managed to just destroy a ton of small states right beforehand. So, is that a good sign? Maybe. Is the African community pissed? Definitely. The total destruction of 15 different states, totally outrageous. Outgoing. And I just realized I drew the lines wrong, so. Wait, no, wrong place. Swahili forces did promise that they would, for now, not do any more aggressive actions in the area, and to put their military back around the originally kept coastal areas. Also, Dina finally did a crackdown on small kingdoms. They destroyed the tribes to the south, and also finally took down the Sakalava, uniting themselves all into the Malagasy kingdom. They also were able to resist French forces who are trying to take over. Success. Europeans at this point were starting to call off of further African expansion. Guess who wasn't? The British. Britain realized that as long as they didn't do anything too aggressive, if they could get away with it. And their first move was to expand in their Sierra Leone colony. The Samories' first move after that was not to even just us vassalize. They straight up conquered the areas that we now call coastal Senegal. Yes, no, Guinea, coastal Guinea. It it was a success, and finally the port of Guanake was built. Or Cornaki, after besieging the French military in the city for literally 2 months until July, when the malaria got so bad for the French that they just had to leave at that point. This meant that now the Samoa didn't even need to rely on Liberia. So Liberia now basically lost their only opportunity to strike gold from one of the few countries that has gold as major known gold reserves. Meanwhile, the Samoa were finalizing their plans. They had taken some of the last small, tiny, insignificant kingdoms onto their side by some totally fair treaties, and now we're planning a war, but not against France. No, against Portugal. The Battle of Bissau. Portugal was unsurprisingly totally flabbergasted, discombobulated. They were still worrying about the Congolese making a further push on Luanda. They, at the moment, weren't paying attention into their colony in Bissau. And the Samoa were about to take it. They sent as many soldiers from Angola as possible to quickly try and stop them. But once they reached the island, it was too late, as the recently built Samoa navy came on from all sides. The 18-hour brutality in the city was insane. But finally, it fell, and it went straight to Samoa hands. But of course, Portugal wasn't going to let this slide. And so they prepared for a great war in Africa. A war to take back their colonies and maybe, just maybe, take back their continent. Quote unquote. That might be the plot of the next video. But anyways, thank you for watching. If you liked it, please subscribe. Don't forget to watch the first few videos so you know how we got here. I saw so many views on the fourth video, but very few on the first four before it. Like, subscribe, and do not get stuck in Bissau in this universe.